Miles lied about tithing. I normally don't like to call names, but there's a preacher that's dead now. And the name of the video was called Tithes, the shocking truth that no one knows. It's 10 minutes and 50 seconds long. And if you've ever watched any of this man's videos, now he passed away some years back in a plane crash, I think, him and his wife. And he was a well-known preacher that traveled all over the world. But I just maybe 2 months ago, maybe 3 months ago, watched a video. I watched a lot of videos by different preachers, but I had never watched this video on tithing because I figured that it wasn't going to be true. But just some few weeks back, I decided to watch it to see what he's going to say. Maybe he would give some truth, but it really wasn't the truth. It was the typical lie that many other preachers give. Because the title was very interesting. Tithes, the shocking truth no one knows. And when I listened to it, the first thing he said was, God don't need your money. Now that was true. 5 words. God don't need your money. I think that's where he said it. That was the truth. And it took about a few seconds to say that. But after that, everything else he said about tithing was a lie. Now, what's so interesting is that what he said sounded so good. I mean, this guy knew how to talk, and he got some kind of person that's an artist that is drawing out what he says. I don't know if you ever watched it or not, but it is really, really interesting. And what he said was tithes and offerings is God's management training program. That's what tithes and offerings is. I'm sorry, but this is so funny. How can a preacher lie like that? There's nothing in the Bible about that at all. Tithes, Bible says all the tithes of the land and the fruit of the tree is the Lord, and is holy to the Lord. And you can go from Genesis, I'm sorry, not Genesis. It's not Genesis. The first tithe law is Hebrews 27:30 to 34. And it's agriculture projects, fruits and vegetables and animals. And that's it. And when you read that, then you go and study Deuteronomy 12th chapter, Deuteronomy 14th chapter, Deuteronomy 26th chapter, all of Numbers 18th chapter, 2 Chronicles 31, Nehemiah 10th chapter, Nehemiah 12th chapter, Nehemiah 13th chapter. I mean, then you go to Amos 4:4, then you go to Malachi, 3rd chapter. Actually, it's best to study Malachi 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then you go to Matthew 23. Then you go to Luke 11, Luke 18 chapters that mentions it. Then you go to Hebrews 7 chapter that mentions tithing. I've studied all those verses in those chapters. And nothing in there says anything about tithing is God's management training program. It's like, what the hell you saying? But it sounded good. So basically what he was saying was that when you give your 10% to God, you're learning how to manage your money. Tithing is not money. I mean, I have studied that from up, down, sideways, and backwards. God never told Israel, number one, to tithe money. Now, money is in tithing. If in what is it, Leviticus 27 chapter verse 30, 31, where he says if a man ought to redeem his tithes, he can pay the tithe, the full price of that fruit and vegetables, and give the money to the Levites, and he can keep his tithes, but he cannot redeem the animals simply because you can't redeem the animals simply because the animal's blood must be shed for the sins of Israel. Then you got a Deuteronomy, I think it's 14th chapter. It's I think Deuteronomy 26th chapter that talks about if the way be too far for thee, you can change it to money. But when you get to the place where God put his name there, change it back to food, products, and animals, and eat it before the Lord, and share it with the Levites as well as the widows, the fatherless, and the stranger. That's what it says. See? If the way be too far for thee, change the money. Many of you, if you study tithing, you know this. But Miles didn't even say anything about that. He wanted people to believe that tithing is God's management training program. Because what it is, well, let me go ahead on. Then he says 10% of everything is mine. He goes back to Malachi. It belongs to God. So, in other words, he said, if you got 10 oranges, one of them belong to God. If you got 10 dresses, one of them belong to God. If you got 10 bananas, I'm sorry, one of them belong to God. Wait a minute. Then he went on and got spiritual about it. If you got, it's 24 hours in a day. 2 hours and 40 minutes belong to God. You need to be praying at least 2 hours and 40 minutes time with God instead of watching TV, which that sounds good. But that has nothing to do with tithing. But it sounded good. It sounds good. It sounds spiritual. But how can a preacher do that? Because he can. Then he said, let me see, 10% of everything is mine. Then he said, consistently put aside 10% of everything for my purpose. That's what he said. I wrote it down for my purpose. In other words, what? God's purpose. In other words, God's purpose for you to support the preachers. That's not what tithing is for. Tithing was for the Levites and the poor, the Levites, the widows, the fathers, and the strangers. Not preachers. Then, he said, why just 10%? It's your ability to put it aside will control your discipline. It will discipline you. You will be disciplined in the area of giving. I'm sorry, but it's just, anyway. A lot of people wrote to his website explaining that he was wrong. And there were people who was arguing with these folks. One guy did 8 paragraphs, literally quoted from Genesis to Hebrews, how he was wrong. And one person wrote him back saying, I'm sorry to disagree with you. I'm sorry, this person wrote 8 paragraphs. I read all 8 of it and he was correct. But there was somebody who argued with the person saying, I'm sorry to disagree with you, but you're wrong. This person believed Miles Monroe lied. Instead of the person did 8 paragraphs. Let me go on, please. This is something that Miles said that was really, really interesting. Your salvation is in the tithe. That's what he said. Your salvation is in the tithe. In other words, if you don't tithe, you going to hell. Now, I'm just putting this out there. The other preacher from Africa said that he saw Miles Monroe in hell. I don't know why. And why? Because of the prosperity message. Then, Then he said, what tithing does to you? Then he goes and talks about, number one, it gives you accountability in your management. Then he said, number two, it gives you discipline. Number three, it gives you honesty. Because he said, God knows managers must be honest. Number four, it gives you diligence. Number five, faithfulness. You're faithful in your giving. And number six, trustworthiness. God can trust you with his tithe. That's it. I'm through. God can trust you with his tithe. In other words, God can trust you with you tithe at 10% to your pastor or your preacher or your bishop or your apostle or your traveler, whoever. That has nothing to do with tithing. Nothing. Bring all the tithes into the storehouse, where there will be meat in mine house. And that word meat means food. But these lying, thieving preachers will consistently say it's money. Not only that, they will completely know Malachi 3:5 that talks about the widows, the fathers, and the strangers, because it was the priest that was robbing God. They was not bringing God the best, according to Malachi chapter 1 and 2, and Malachi chapter 3, verse 5. They were not sharing with the widows, the fatherless, and the strangers, because the scripture says, rob not the poor, because he is poor. The priest was robbing the poor, just like these lying, thieving preachers are robbing the congregations every Sunday. God bless.